give everyone an introduction. First of all, my name is Catherine Griffith. I'm a member of the Associate Board at Gilda's Club, New York. If you guys aren't familiar with the Associates Board, we are a group of young ambassadors for Gilda's Club who helps raise money and also promote Gilda's Club throughout New York. I'm super excited that we're doing one of our first virtual cooking class with Lidey Heuck, who you'll see pinned to the screen in 1 minute. I just want to give you a quick intro on her. Lidey started her career as Ina Garten, famous chef, who I'm personally obsessed with, her assistant for about 6 years, and is now her own chef, and she has her own blog, Lidey Likes. I definitely recommend that you guys check it out. If you're foodies like I am, she's also a recipe contributor to New York Times Cooking, as well as she's been featured on a bunch of other food blogs. Tonight, she's going to be taking us through a spring green pasta recipe. The class will approximately be an hour, 50 minutes of cooking, and then maybe 10 minutes at the end for a Q&A. Just a few housekeeping rules. If you guys could please keep yourselves on mute the whole time. If you have any questions throughout the class, feel free to chat me. My name is Catherine Griffith. I think I'll be one of the only options for you to chat throughout the class. And if it's anything that people are looking to know right away, I'll just kind of interrupt Lidey and ask her as we go along. And then at the end, feel free to unmute yourselves during the Q&A section so that you can ask Lidey any questions that you have. But I am going to hand it over to Lidey, who I'm super excited to welcome to our first virtual cooking class.
Thank you, Catherine. Can you hear me, Catherine? Good, thumbs up? Okay, great. I always just like to double check because I don't want to get started and talk to myself here. I'm so happy to be here with everyone. I'm excited to show you this recipe, which is a really great summer or spring dish with a bunch of really good spring vegetables, and it's going to come together pretty quickly. The first thing, I'm going to walk you through a little bit what we're going to do, but the very first thing I'd love for everyone to do is just start your pot of water going if you haven't. Big pot of water, and we're going to salt it and cook the pasta in that. So I'll just turn this on and I'll have this going in the back. So as Catherine said, I'll just reiterate, if you have any questions at any point about the recipe, please put them into the chat. I really don't mind being interrupted, and I want to be helpful, and I want everyone to feel like they can follow along. So please don't hesitate to ask any questions at all. And I'm going to try to keep the pace of this class fast enough that if you're not cooking along, you can still enjoy it, but slow enough that everyone who's cooking can follow along. And I'll show you some interesting techniques and some good tips about the ingredients we're using, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. So the first thing we're going to do is make the ricotta that goes on top of the pasta. So we're sort of starting at the end. This pasta is basically just a celebration of spring produce. We have asparagus, leeks, peas, and spinach, and fresh mint, and lemon. So it's these really super bright and light flavors and really great seasonal vegetables. And because we have all those vegetables, I can't help myself but add something rich and creamy on top. That said, if you have any special dietary concerns, or you're just eating a little bit healthier, you can feel free to omit the ricotta, even the Parmesan. Those, of course, cheese is always going to make anything better, but this is still a delicious pasta without them. So please make any modifications. And if you have questions too about modifications, that's something I may be able to advise on as well throughout the class. So the first thing we're going to do is make this ricotta, and we're starting with store-bought ricotta, and I didn't take it out of the package because I wanted to show you this is the type of ricotta that I buy. When you go to the grocery store, unless you're at a very fancy supermarket, it can be hard to know what ricotta you want. And this one, which is almost like super stuffed into this, is like a tin container, I think is the best ricotta that is widely available. This one I got at just like a very regular grocery store, but a lot of ricottas that you'll find at a typical grocery store are just really processed, and they're not going to have that kind of fresh, light, really creamy flavor and texture. So
Lidey, I just want to ask you a question. We had Lexi asked if it's okay if they don't have white wine to use for the recipe. So just
yes, it is absolutely okay. When we get there, I will suggest this again, but you can use, if you've got like a white wine vinegar, just a splash of that, maybe like a tablespoon or so, with some water, like a half a cup of water. You would basically want to mimic the sweetness that you're going to be adding from the wine, and a little bit of like tang, but absolutely. All right, this always like explodes. I want to take it out of here, but. And one tip that I always give when I'm cooking and doing cooking classes is to have a bowl. Like this is just a regular glass bowl, any bowl, and just have it on the side. And that way, as we're prepping the vegetables, any little odds and ends, you can just throw them in the bowl, and it kind of helps you keep like a clean workspace, which is a great tip if you're a messy cook naturally, like I am. So I'm going to do about a cup of ricotta into the bowl, and then this is a really simple topping that we're making, but it's just the perfect kind of complement to this pasta dish, and it's also something you can do on a lot of different things. You could use this with bruschetta, you could use it like as a dip. It's just really versatile. So we're gonna grab a lemon, and I apologize, I may have left a microplane zester off of the ingredient list, or off of the equipment list, and if I did, I apologize. If you don't have one, you can also use the very fine side of a cheese grater. We're just going to grate the lemon zest right over top of the ricotta. And if you are using a cheese grater or something that's not meant for zesting, I would just be careful. We only want to take the very outer peel. We don't want to get down to the white pith, which is really bitter. So you want to just do it, and you can kind of check. It should still be pale yellow where you've zested, and we're just going to zest right over the ricotta, and you should already be able to smell the delicious lemony aroma. I think that lemon zest is a lot more fragrant and flavorful in some ways than lemon juice because it just hits you immediately. It's almost like a concentrated lemon flavor. So I love to use it in something that's not cooked, like in this ricotta that's just gonna go on top of the dish, because the first thing that hits you when you take a bite is that really nice lemon fragrance. So just go around, work your way around. And then I'm going to reserve this lemon for serving, so don't put it too far away. Perfect. And then I'm going to add about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I use kosher salt, and I call for that in all of my recipes. And I know that not everybody has and uses kosher salt. It's really what restaurant chefs use because it's the mildest salt. It's a lot milder than like an iodized table salt, the kind of round canister with the Morton girl in the raincoat. If you don't have kosher salt and you are using like an iodized table salt, I would always say just go easy on the salt. You can always add more, but a measurement calling for kosher salt is going to be a little bit different than the amount you're going to want to use if you're just using iodized salt. All right, so I'm going to give this a nice kind of a gentle mix. I don't want to like smash the ricotta down. Basically just getting that lemon zest incorporated. And so, like I said, if you're making something with roasted vegetables, like on toast, this would be a really good base. It's just a wonderful, creamy, lemony spread that you can really use for a lot of different things, especially if you have leftover ricotta. All right, so that's nice and mixed. I'm just gonna set this aside until way later. And we are gonna start prepping our vegetables. So the first vegetable that I am using today is a leek. And I have made this recipe with many different kinds of onions, yellow onions, even scallions, but I love using the leek because I think it's a vegetable that people don't really know what to do with a lot of times. And it's got a really great kind of mild oniony flavor. It's not harsh like a red onion or a yellow onion. And I think it goes really well with the kind of delicate flavors in this recipe. So I'm going to show you how to prep a leek, and if you have no idea, then now you'll know. So this is what it looks like when you buy it from the grocery store. We're going to cut, basically, I'm not good at math, but I feel like maybe this is a 45-degree angle. Holding the root of the leek, we're going to cut these kind of thicker leaves, outer leaves out. So we're going to cut away from our hand and go around and turn the leek and cut, make big cuts. You really can't mess this up, so don't worry. But basically the idea is we're cutting at this angle to preserve some of the inside of the leek, which is that really tender light green part. So we'll keep going around until all of the dark part of the leek is cut off. And sometimes you can trim the end a little bit too. And then we're gonna get rid of all of those outer leaves, and we'll do the same with the other leek. Perfect. Now you may have seen, depending on your specific leek, but when you cut those outer leaves, you can see a lot of times there's a lot of mud that's in a leek, or sometimes it's like a sandy, and we want to get rid of any of that grit before we use leeks. So you don't have to wash most onions before you use them, but you do want to give these leeks a wash, and I'll show you how we do that. So now you've got this sort of shorter, like nubby piece of leek, and basically what we're going to do is hold it down on the cutting board, and we're going to cut lengthwise, but not all the way to the root. Leave just the root intact and cut lengthwise all the way down the root, or all the way down the leaf. We'll do that with both. And then we're just going to cut crosswise, thinly slicing, as reasonably thin as you can get it. Don't go too crazy. Can you still hear me, Catherine? We good? Okay. And this is a round vegetable, so I'm always careful to hold it steady with my hand so that I don't cut myself. And we're just gonna thinly slice, and you'll have these beautiful half moons. And just be careful as you get to the end of the leek. Be careful of your fingers. And like a scallion, a leek has sort of a whiter part by the root and a darker green part by the end. And the whiter part is the kind of stronger oniony part of the leek. So you want to make sure it's even starting at my eyes a little bit. So you want to make sure you get that close to the root so you get that oniony part. And we'll do it with the second leek. That first leek was enormous. One thing you'll notice about this recipe as we go along is that it's at the beginning, we've got these like big piles of vegetables, and they really cook down tremendously. So it's going to seem like, you know, we've got so many onions, and then you'll see obviously the spinach is going to shrink, but it gives you a sense of really how many vegetables you're eating when you eat a dish like this, even though it is a pasta. All right. Okay, I'm going to try not to cry. So behind me, I've got a bowl of cold water, or at least room temperature water. If you don't have one, take a second and fill a little bowl with water. What we're going to do is basically put our leeks into the water and kind of swirl them around, and that's going to release any of that sand and that grit from the leeks. Perfect. Carefully do this here. So just with my hands, I'm just sort of moving them around, breaking up any of the bigger pieces. And now the trick is, I'm going to actually grab another bowl. You don't want to just pour these leeks like into a colander to drain the water, because then you're just dumping all of the sand and all of that grit right over top of them. So I'm going to use, you can use a slotted spoon or one of these cute little spider tools to kind of lift the leeks right out, shaking off as much excess water as you can. And put them in this bowl. Now, if you want to be really fancy and very rule abiding, you would put these leeks in a salad spinner and dry them, because we're going to saute them. And when you saute a vegetable, you really want it to be dry so that it doesn't steam. However, I never do that with this recipe, and I think it's just fine. And I think it's a step that is completely fine to skip, and it saves a lot of time in dishes. So if you want to do it, go ahead. I'm not going to do it. All right, so we can get rid of that bowl, and we'll set our leeks aside here. By the way, I would just keep checking every few minutes to see how our water's doing. Everyone's oven or stove is a little bit different, so mine's getting close. If you don't have a lid on your pot, I would put a lid on there so it'll come to a boil more quickly. And we are going to move on to our asparagus. So I've got a pound of asparagus here, and I tend to like thin asparagus because they cook faster, they're more tender, they're a little bit, sometimes bigger asparagus can be a little bit stringy. So I always choose one that's on the thinner side. If you have asparagus that are on the thicker side, I'll show you what to do here. First, I'm going to trim, no matter what size they are, I'm going to trim about 1 inch or so from the bottom. And that's just kind of a tougher part of the stalk that's not going to be as delicious. Another good little trick is sometimes you can snap the asparagus stalk, but I find that sometimes if you just snap it, it ends up snapping too far up and you're kind of like missing half the stalk. So if you've got kind of medium to thick stalks of asparagus, what I would suggest doing is, and this is a little bit of a pain, but it's totally worth it for how quickly this is going to come together. I would cut your asparagus in half lengthwise, almost the way we did with the leek. And that's just going to create a thinner piece of asparagus that's going to cook a lot faster and be a lot more tender. My asparagus are on the very thin side, so I think I'm going to be okay. But I'll give you a little head start to do that. And you can also do it, to half of them or some of them if you feel like you have any particularly thick ones. And then basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to break these into 2 bunches so it's easier to deal with. And I'm going to cut on the diagonal. So I have nice angles on my asparagus. I'm going to cut about 1.5 inches, kind of like a bite-sized piece crosswise. And there's no right or wrong here. It's really whatever size, you like. You don't want them to be too huge because we want to be able to really toss the pasta together. Perfect. We get these other ones. Great. Our second pile of vegetables is ready. So believe it or not, we are going to be ready to start sort of the components of this sauce. It does come together really quickly, so we want to try to time it for the time that the orecchiette is going to be done cooking. So let's check on that really quickly. Of course, the watch pot never boils, but I'm very impatient. So grab a large skillet. If you don't, this is a 12-inch skillet. If you don't have a 12-inch skillet, a 10-inch skillet will work. You'll just want to transfer everything to the pasta pot when we mix everything. I mean, you can try to do it in a 10-inch skillet. It just may be a little bit full. And we're going to heat this over like medium heat, medium low heat. We're basically just going to saute the leeks. We want them to be tender and translucent, but not brown or fried or crispy. So you may have to play with your heat a little bit depending on your stove. And this is my trusty special camping stove, which tends to run very hot. So if you see me kind of adjusting the heat, that's really just to keep it consistent. So we're going to do about 3 tablespoons of olive oil in our skillet. Totally fine to eyeball it. And then we're going to let that oil get a little bit heated up here. A good little test is we'll just flick the leek. I think we'll give it a minute. And basically, we're just going to cook the leeks and the asparagus in stages so that the leeks have time to get really tender because they're going to take the longest to cook, and then the asparagus and then the peas. We're sort of working our way from the ingredient that takes the longest to cook to the shortest, and then we add the pasta. So I'm going to go ahead and add my leeks, and I'm going to do it in little handfuls like this because I know that some water will have collected at the bottom of the bowl. So this is a good way to kind of just minimize the water that gets in there. Perfect. Great, grab a wooden spoon. And we're going to toss this sort of, occasionally, I would say. You want to make sure that all the leeks kind of have their turn on the bottom of the pan, and they'll shrink significantly too. But one trick I have learned is that you don't actually, when you're sauteing vegetables, you don't want to fuss with them too much. It just makes them take longer. And I can be really fussy sometimes in the kitchen or impatient. And to some extent, I don't want to say walk away and go write an email, but the more you stir, you're kind of slowing down the process, cooling down the pan, and just making it take a little bit longer. Sort of like a watch pot never boils. All right, speaking of my watch pot, I see some steam coming out here. So I'm gonna go ahead and add about a tablespoon or so of salt to my pot. We always wanna cook pasta in salted water. And then I'm gonna add my pasta. And I love orecchiette. I think it's a really great shape and it kind of holds the sauce really well. And I also love that in this recipe, so many things are the same size, so you get a really nice bite with everything in it. But I've also made this recipe with spaghetti, with penne, with gemelli, all kinds of different things. So use whatever you have and whatever you like. It's the moral of the story. All right, so I'm just gonna let my pasta cook away, uncovered, come back to a boil, and I'm gonna just keep an eye on it as we work on the vegetables, and then hopefully the timing will work out such that they'll be ready at about the same time. So already I can see these leeks have shrunken and they're taking up a lot less of the pan. And they've got a nice sizzle going, but they're not browning at all. So if you find that your leeks are starting to get a little frizzled and brown, just turn the heat down a little bit. Of course, I'm doing exactly what I said not to do, it's just stirring. Great. I'm thinking maybe this is a good time, we've got a little break, to tell you about the wine pairing that I suggested with this recipe. But first, Catherine, I just want to make sure if anybody has any questions or concerns so far, happy to answer them.
All good. Keep going.
All good? Great. I do wish I could see everyone, so I could see everyone cooking along, but I know you're all there. So the wine that I have sort of paired with this recipe, first I'll just say that really any dry white wine is going to be great with this recipe. I don't think it's worth going crazy trying to find a super specific wine. So the wine pairing that I'm suggesting is pretty broad, but you know, if you've got a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc or Pinot Grigio in the fridge and that's what you have, by all means use that for this recipe. And by the way, just as an aside, before I get into that, just, you know, stir the pasta every couple of minutes, whenever you think about it, just to keep it moving so it doesn't stick. So the first wine is called Vermintino, and these are both, Vermintino and Verdicchio are the two white wines. They're both super dry Italian white wines. I figured that would be fitting because it's a pasta dish. Vermintino is often comes from Sicily or even Corsica, which is an island near Sicily, which is technically France, but definitely kind of has an island feel about it. People say that it has a salinity, which is almost like a salty, like a seawater type of taste to it. It's super dry, crisp. It's kind of one of those wines that everyone likes because it's just like, you know, very straightforward, very refreshing. So that's a great one. And some Vermentino, sort of more expensive Vermentino, is aged in barrels the way that Chardonnay is, so it can have a little bit of that oakiness. I tend to get the more inexpensive unoaked Vermentino, and I think it's delicious. So that's what I would personally recommend. And then Verdicchio is another white wine, another super dry white wine. They're both like crowd pleaser wines, which is why I recommended them too. I'm always wary of suggesting something that's too, I don't know, off the wall, and I just want everyone to like it. So Verdicchio is another dry white that comes from central Italy. So all you have to remember is that they both start with V, and go into a wine store and just say, the white wine from Italy that starts with a V. And hopefully they'll know. All right. So we may be coming to this point at different points depending on how hot your stove is, but my leeks are looking translucent and tender. And I think I'm going to go ahead. And add my asparagus. You want to make sure to give the asparagus plenty of time to cook too. Depending on how fresh it is, you know, it will cook faster or slower. When you get really good in-season asparagus, you're going to have one that is a lot more tender to eat when it's cooked less. And if you've got like, you know, your regular old grocery store asparagus, it's probably, you're going to want to cook it a little more and make it a little more tender. All right. Another thing I was thinking when I was showing you the ricotta is that if you wanted kind of a lighter, slightly lighter, maybe more casual take on this recipe, I think it would be really good if you just made the vegetable mix, which I'll show you like the final thing, and did toast with the ricotta and like a big spoonful of vegetables. I think that would be really good. I like a thumbs up. That would actually, I think, be a really good springy appetizer. All right, I'm gonna give my pasta another stir. If you haven't already, this is a great time to get some of your other ingredients ready and prepped, because once this pasta starts coming together, it comes together pretty quickly. So I've got my white wine. I've got 3/4 cup of white wine. I would also just say if you have a little bit of a wine bottle, a little bit of wine left in the bottle, you've got a half cup is fine. You definitely don't need to like open a new bottle just to get that extra little bit. And I know someone asked before about not using wine, and I'll explain that again. I think that, you know, wine is adding a little bit of complexity, a little bit of acid, a little bit of sweetness. It's by no means necessary. It does add some depth of flavor to the dish. But I think if you were to add just, I would say a tablespoon or 2 of a white wine or champagne vinegar, that's going to do the same thing. And I would just sort of dilute the rest with water. Maybe just do a 1/2 cup water because we don't want this to be watery, but that's a good alcohol substitute in a lot of recipes. Obviously depends what it is, but if you think about, what is the wine adding to the dish and what is the flavor, you can very often kind of figure out what a good substitute for that is. And that's something that I come across a lot in recipe development that I do, is that people want substitutions for everything. And so a lot of times there isn't a good one, but I do feel like there are ways around alcohol and the food can still be delicious. All right, pasta's looking good. I would also, if you haven't, I would pop a colander in the sink so that when your pasta's ready, you can head over there. And I'm just gonna grab one thing that I forgot over here.
Lidey, I just have a question from Lexi.
Yeah.
She asked if sweet rice wine would work.
Sweet rice wine. Sweet rice wine. Maybe what I would do is taste it. And if it tastes super sweet, I would use maybe a few tablespoons of it, almost the way you would vinegar, maybe a 1/4 cup and then the rest water. Because we don't want this, the leeks are sort of naturally sweet in this recipe, and I would hesitate about kind of overpowering it with a sweet wine. But let me know how it turns out. All right. So our asparagus is looking like it's getting there, but of course, I just want to keep stirring it. We're going to let it go for another minute. Give one of these guys a try. Actually close. So I'm going to grab, by the way, I'm going to grab the rest of my ingredients because, as I said, once this comes together, it's going to be pretty quick. I've got 1 cup of frozen peas. If I ever can find fresh peas, I love to use them in this recipe. I couldn't, unfortunately, today find them. Frozen peas, I will say, everything else in this recipe is fresh, but I think frozen peas are great. And they cook quickly. They still have a little bit of texture. They're not soggy. I think that's a great ingredient to buy frozen. And most of the year you can't find fresh peas anyway. And if you could, I'm not sure how good they would be. So I always opt for frozen peas in a pinch. One thing I'll say too, as you keep cooking the asparagus and the leeks, you might notice some brown spots forming on the bottom of the pan. Don't worry about that. I mean, you can certainly lower the heat if it's getting like really brown, but a little bit of brown is going to create some great flavor, and then we're going to deglaze with the white wine. So a little bit of brown spots are totally fine. All righty. I'm going to add the peas and the wine to our skillet, or your wine substitute. And immediately that smell of that wine is gonna come to the surface. And I'm just gonna basically deglaze the pan. So I'm scraping up any of those brown bits, which is releasing all of that flavor and add it to our sauce essentially. So we're gonna kind of let this come to a simmer, and that residual heat's gonna defrost the frozen peas. If you have fresh peas, you can wait until the wine has reduced a little bit to add them, but for the frozen peas, I just want to make sure they had enough time. I'm gonna check on my pasta one more time. Okay, my pasta's done. Your pasta might not be done, but before I drain it, and this is something I very often forget to do, but I'm gonna reserve about a cup of the pasta water. So I'm just gonna dip my glass measuring cup into the pasta water. And this starchy pasta water, I'm just gonna set it up here, is really gonna be the basis of this sauce. It's an incredible base for a sauce because it's starchy and it thickens beautifully and also absorbs into the pasta. So set that aside, we'll let it cool down a little bit. First it's steaming, I'll move it over here. And I'm just gonna drain my pasta. If yours is still going, just obviously do it when you get to that point. Whew. Okay, I'm gonna set this aside for a minute, which I don't love to do, but I wanna make sure we can get this sauce finished before we need to add the pasta. So when your liquid has, I would say, reduced by about half to 3/4, shouldn't take longer than a minute or two, we're gonna go ahead and add some salt and pepper. And again, I always, I tend to like things pretty salty, but I would err on the side of caution here. We can always add more seasoning at the end. Let me tell you how much I said to put. I actually don't remember here. 3/4 teaspoon salt and 1/4 teaspoon pepper. Black pepper is something I think really is to taste because some people love it, some people don't. So this smells really good. For those of you who are cooking, and if you've gotten to this point, it's getting to the good part. All right, so we've got our white wine sizzling away, all the alcohol is burned off, and I'm just gonna go to the fridge and grab our baby spinach. So I've got 5 ounces of baby spinach. Baby kale would also work. Mature spinach would work. Any kind of quick cooking baby green. And I'm just gonna add kind of as much as the pot can handle, or the pan can handle. And just keep that little bit of liquid sizzling away. The steam from that is gonna help wilt our spinach. And we'll just kind of keep cooking. You can be on like a low, medium, low heat by this point. And by the way, if you want, this is a good part too, to test a piece of asparagus and make sure it should be crisp, tender. It's still gonna have a little bit more heat, but you wanna make sure that at this point when you're adding the spinach and that it's getting there. And that's why I say too, to cut it in half lengthwise, because it just helps everything cook a little bit more quickly. All right. Looking at this skillet of vegetables makes me think this would be really great on the ricotta with toast. And I could even just dive into this with like some scrambled eggs. All right, we'll keep tossing. Hope everyone's doing okay out there, and I'm not going too fast. It is a little tricky because everybody's oven is different. So I try to keep the pace, reasonable, but. All right. Almost done. I'm gonna add the last of my spinach here. I'm gonna give my pasta a quick little toss, just that helps it if you need to have your pasta sitting for a few minutes, which isn't ideal for pasta, but just give it a quick stir and that will kind of keep it from sticking. It's also a lot easier with a shaped pasta like an orecchiette than a spaghetti, which tends to stick a lot more. Another reason why I love this recipe, it's just, orecchiette is just an easy pasta to work with. All right. So I think that I might, if I were making this not during a cooking class, I might transfer everything to the pot because I like a big bowl and it's easier to toss. I'm gonna keep it in the skillet so I can show you, you can see a little bit more easily, but if you're a very neat cook, you may wanna, at this point, transfer things back to the pasta pot. It also will depend on like how high the sides of your skillet are. I use a skillet with a low side so that you can see more easily, but it means that it's got a little bit less capacity. All right. So my spinach is just wilted, which is exactly what I want. I don't love to cook spinach until it basically disappears. I like to still have a little bit of heft. So when you get to this point, just give everything a good stir. And we're gonna add our pasta. I feel like this is gonna go all over the place, but I'll just try. I'm gonna add a little bit and then fold this in. And we're gonna add, where'd my pasta water go? We're gonna add the pasta water. I'm gonna add about a half cup, I think, to start. I kind of like to keep extra because if the skillet gets dry at any point, I can always add more, but I don't wanna overcook the pasta by adding too much liquid and then having to have it reduced. So we'll add about a half cup and save the rest. It's a very full skillet. And now we're gonna cook basically on like a low to medium low heat, depending on your stove. And basically just keep an eye on that liquid. If it looks like it's drying out, you know, before a minute or so, go ahead and add the rest of that pasta water. This is a very full skillet. And just give everything a nice toss. I would also make a note here, just, you know, if you want to make a pasta recipe a little bit lighter and a little bit kind of lower carb, you can always do 12 ounces of pasta instead of a pound. I think that for the recipes that I do, not everybody likes to have that little bit of pasta left over in the box, but that makes for a pasta that just has more vegetables and less pasta. And that's really nice a lot of the time because you still get all that delicious, you know, pasta flavor, and it's just a little bit more heavy on the vegetables. So you can just sort of tilt your skillet a little bit and see how the liquid's doing. We still want, I would say by this point, after you've been cooking the pasta for about a minute or two, you still want there to be some liquid in the bottom of the pan because we're gonna add butter and cheese and that's gonna help thicken that a little bit more. So I'm gonna add maybe a quarter cup more. And at this point too, I am gonna add another pinch of salt. You can also taste at any point. The great thing about a vegetarian recipe is you can taste away the entire time, see how you're doing on seasoning. Smells so good. All right. And what will happen basically when your pasta water has reduced a bit, it will start to look a little bit starchy. It won't be clear anymore, and that's what we want. That means that it's reducing and thickening a little bit. So generally I'm gonna cook this pasta for, I would say, 2 to 3 minutes total, just until that pasta water is looking a little bit cloudy and looking like it's reducing a little bit. And you can always keep that extra pasta water on the side too, because if you're tossing the pasta and it's done, and maybe it's sitting for a few minutes as you're setting the table, you can always add a little bit more if the pasta looks dry. It's just a great ingredient to have on hand that you shouldn't just pour down the drain. All right, now for the good stuff. We're gonna grab 2 tablespoons butter. And again, you know, if you wanna cut back a little bit, totally fine. I'm not cutting back today. And we're gonna get, so this is off the heat now, I should say. The pasta is off the heat, it's on the stove, but I've turned the heat off. And that's basically so that everything, the butter's gonna melt slowly. We're gonna stir in that Parmesan cheese, it's gonna melt slowly. We're gonna add the lemon juice. We don't want the lemon juice to get really hot. So this is just sort of, we're adding these sort of last touches on a gentler, less hot pan. So it's tossed kind of just to get that butter melted. And as the butter melts, it's going to thicken with that pasta water and help kind of finish our glossy, beautiful, delicious sauce here. All right, I'm going to add my lemon juice next. And I think this is the best, easiest way to add lemon juice. Just squeeze over clean hand, catching the seeds in your hand. Ooh, one went flying. Perfect. It's a very juicy lemon. And this is just going to add a really nice kind of acidic, fresh finish to the pasta. I think whenever you're adding richer ingredients like butter and cheese, it's always great to have kind of a vinegar or a fresh citrus to kind of cut through the richness and just keep it really nice and balanced. And what I like about the wine is that wine kind of is adding acid and kind of a bite as well, but it's a lot more mellow than fresh lemon juice, so it's a great balance to the kind of sourness of the lemon juice. So we'll toss that. Now it should really be smelling good here. All right, and now you'll see all those vegetables. Where'd they go? They're all in here, but. And then finally, I do the Parmesan last. And the reason I do Parmesan last is because Parmesan, when it's melted at too strong of a heat, it can seize and become a little bit chewy. So we kind of just want to let everything else get nice and melty, and then we're going to add in our Parmesan. And together, the Parmesan and the butter give this pasta a really creamy feel and flavor without any heavy cream. A lot of lemony pastas, like if you've ever made spaghetti al limon or even Alfredo, there are versions you can make that don't have heavy cream in them that are still really creamy. And obviously we added butter and cheese. It's not like just pasta water in here, but it makes for a kind of brighter flavor. I think that heavy cream can add kind of cover a lot of stronger flavors. And I think I really wanted to preserve the fresh vegetable flavor in this dish. So give this a nice toss. This is a great time too, if you're ahead of me at this point, if you want to just taste for seasoning. Obviously Parmesan is adding a little bit of salt, so you may want to taste and see how it is for you. You might want more salt, more pepper. And if you look at the bottom of your dish now, if you tilt it, you shouldn't have a ton of liquid rushing. And if you do, if you still feel like you've got a fair amount of liquid at the bottom, just keep tossing. That pasta is going to absorb that water right up. That's a big pan of pasta. All right. I'm going to grab a fork, actually. Do a little taste test here. That's great. I'm actually just going to add a little bit of pepper. I think pepper adds, you know, black pepper is just super subtle heat, but I think it really like kind of balances and complements rich and creamy flavors, and just cuts through them in a really nice way. Sort of similar to how you would do in like a cacio e pepe. Great. All right. I'm gonna give this one more toss. You wanna just make sure that the Parmesan has melted and you don't see little flecks of it. And we are ready to serve this up. We're right on time. So for serving, one of the things that I love about this dish is it feels really special when you serve it, because it's got the pasta with a little lemon ricotta on the side. It's almost like a restaurant trick that will make this seem a lot sort of fancier and more complicated than it was to make. So when I serve it, also it's a lot easier to plate a shorter shape of pasta than a spaghetti, because you can just spoon it into a bowl. I'm just gonna do a big spoonful, maybe like 3 big spoonfuls. I'll do another big one just so you can see. This is like a huge portion here. And then I'm gonna take my ricotta. I'll just give it a nice little toss. Hold on. Clear the deck here. And I'm actually gonna grab one more spoon. I'll show you a little trick. You can use 2 spoons. Let's see if you can see what I'm doing here. To make a perfect little quenelle. That is the fancy term for this. And basically we're just making a nice rounded shape. So you can like sort of pack the ricotta onto 1 spoon like that, and then just stick the spoon, slide them sort of against each other. I'm gonna add a little extra just so you can see it better, not because I want to eat more. And you get a nice kind of rounded shape of ricotta. And you could stop here, but I'm going to do a couple more finishing touches. I use fresh herbs on almost everything I make. I just think as the last touch, a fresh herb, especially with the lemon zest in this recipe, fresh mint is just going to be perfect, and it's just going to be bright and fragrant, and it's just going to tell you that this is a fresh spring pasta. So I tear mint, I tear basil. I think that it's just a little bit gentler than taking like a sharp knife, especially for herbs that are so delicate and bruise easily. So I just save this for like the last minute. You can also chop it. You don't have to be so fussy, but sprinkle it right on top. And now you get the mint, you get the lemon, you get kind of that like cheesy, that's just, yeah. And then just for, you know, a little bit of contrast, I'll do a little bit of black pepper, a little bit of salt. You can do a little bit more Parmesan if you want. The point really here is that when you are finished cooking a dish, whatever it is, whether it's a Tuesday night or you're having friends over and it's a dinner party, thinking about the way you finish the dish is a really easy way to kind of elevate whatever you're cooking and make it feel really special to whoever you're serving it to. And I think a lot of times these are things that we have around, but I know I'm in a rush a lot of the time, so I just want to sit down and eat. But taking the time to add a little bit of fresh mint, a little bit of lemon zest to something like this is just going to really take it up a notch. So that's it. I hope everyone is, if not finished, somewhat coming along and coming close. But if we want to chat for a few minutes so everyone can finish up, I'm happy to answer any questions. Where's my fork? I feel like I want to dig in and take a bite after all of that too. Let's see how it is. I mean, this is one of my favorites. One of my favorites. It's just, I love all the fresh flavor. It's the perfect mix of like fresh, super green flavors and then a little bit of creaminess. So it's like just well balanced, and 'tis the season to make this, truly. How you doing, Catherine?
Good. If, most of you guys probably saw me the entire time because my mom was basically making the pasta behind me. So it's all done. I'm very excited to eat it.
Oh, great.
But thank you so much. That was
of course.
awesome.
If anyone has any questions, I can't see your faces, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may
guys,
have.
you don't have to chat me. Just feel free to unmute.
I have one question. I know I'm going to have so many leftovers. What is the best way to reheat this?
Oh, that's a great question. Low heat on the stove. I mean, who am I kidding? The microwave if you're in a rush, but I would say low heat in a pot and just be gentle with it. Because of the Parmesan in this dish, you don't want to overheat it and kind of cause that Parmesan to seize. You know, I've actually never done this, but it would be really smart to save a little extra pasta water if you think you're going to reheat it, because adding that little pasta water will help that sauce come back together without just adding plain water. But even a splash of plain water, don't get crazy. I'm talking like a tablespoon, but that little bit of liquid is going to kind of rejuvenate the sauce and kind of bring it back to life. And covered, I would do it in a covered pot so that the steam kind of gently reheats the pasta.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? Well, I hope everyone's enjoying it.
If no one else has a question, I have one random question that I just need answered by an expert, and that is, what is the best way to cut an onion? I know that there's actually a method, and I just like.
There is. I'm trying to think. Do you want me to show you?
I mean, if that works.
I feel that if I describe it, it will not be as helpful as if I just show you. Let me see if I have an onion.
I have one friend who used to work in a kitchen, and she showed me one time, but like it just happened so fast. Okay,
you're in luck. Let me clear my decks here. This is definitely one of those things I think it will just be easier to show you. And also, I'm extremely sensitive to onions, so if I start crying for real, I apologize. I actually have these onion goggles that a friend got me, and you put them on and they have like foam, so it suctions to your face, and they're really hilarious, but they work really well. I think they're like $10 on Amazon.
Somebody said put wet paper towels nearby. And that
for my eyes?
It keeps you from crying.
Oh, I'll try it. Good, we're getting really experimental here. Let's try it. I feel like there are all kinds of tricks I've heard, like turn on your fan on your oven. That doesn't work for me, but if this one works, then I have someone to thank.
Yeah, glasses.
Okay.
My glass.
Here's our onion. We've got the root and this kind of other end. So we're gonna keep this root intact. This is the most important part. I'm gonna place the onion down with the root up, kind of on this opposite side. First though, to make it easier, I'll trim this like little tail here. This is a little bit of an old onion, so it's not like super firm, but we're just gonna cut that end and we'll put it face down so it doesn't wobble. Then I'm gonna cut vertically, cut this onion in half through the stem. So I've got one half, which is half of the root, and the other has half of the root. And then I always peel an onion after I cut it in half. I feel like it's just easier. Oh, the peel. God, this is a red onion, which particularly make me cry. Although this is a good tip that does help me, is that if you keep your onions in the refrigerator, they are less juicy. And so it will be a little bit easier on your eyes if you do.
Yeah, they don't grow all the stuff either. They tend to do well in the refrigerator.
Yeah, I mean, this has lasted a long time.
Right.
You can see it's starting to sprout actually a little bit. So what I do when I see that, I just cut it out. Same thing with garlic. If you've ever got garlic that's starting to sprout, you don't have to throw it out. Just cut that little green part out.
I found a hint that works for garlic. You can put it in a paper bag, but punch holes in the paper bag. My garlic lasted about 4 or 5 months. And it
4 or
was
5 months?
Yes. I thought about it, and it was
at room temperature? At
room temperature in the window where there's no sun coming in. And it was a paper bag that I just did a hole punch. And yes, I saw that on a chef thing. And I thought,
I have to try that. I feel like my garlic, I always buy more than I need. And
me too. And
I never go through it fast enough.
Like, this is great.
All right, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna follow up with you in 5 months. So that's sort of an unnecessary step, but I just took that little sprouting part out. So now we've got a nice flat edge where we cut. I'm a lefty, so this might be opposite for most people, but I'll try to explain it in an ambidextrous way. So we're gonna hold the onion flat, so we've got a good grip with the root to your left, the stem to your left if you're a righty. So it'd be like this. But for me, it's like this. And basically, we're gonna do 3 different cuts. This is gonna be a perfectly chopped onion. Flat palm. We're gonna make horizontal cuts starting close to the board and working our way up. So it's gonna be like 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm gonna start at the cut edge, working toward the stem or the root. And basically I'm gonna go as close to the root as I can get with my knife without cutting myself or slicing through the root, because again, we wanna keep this onion intact. So with my heel of my hand down like that, and do this. This is, you know, do this carefully. Okay. The last one should be pretty close to your hand there. So I think I did maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cuts. Depends on the onion. All right, now we're gonna turn this perpendicular with the root away from you, so like at the front of your board. And I'm gonna make cuts this way, starting on the left side or the right side. I'm gonna make cuts all the way down to the cutting board, but I'm not, again, I wanna leave this root totally intact. So I wanna go like as close as I can. Can you see how yeah, maybe this is better. My knife is gonna go in and I'm gonna go all the way down, and I'm gonna kind of keep about maybe 1/4 of an inch between my cuts. And this of course depends on how big you want your onion pieces to be. And we're gonna go all the way across this onion. Again, please be careful. This gets easier the more you do it, and it's much easier with a sharp knife. Okay, and then this is the fun part. Now we've done that, we're gonna put the onion back the way it was at the beginning with the root to the outside. It's to my right. I think it would be to your left if you're a righty. And we're just gonna cut crosswise, and these perfect little pieces of onion are gonna fall down onto the cutting board. And this can get a little tricky as you get to the root, so just, you may have to kind of turn the onion a little bit to get close to the root without cutting yourself. But again, the more often you do this, the easier it will get. And for someone like me who is sensitive to onions, this is the quickest, sort of most painless way to do it. And then we've got perfect onion pieces. Amazing. My eyes aren't that bad. I don't know if it was the paper towel or not, but they're not that bad.
I think red onions don't, for you, you said it makes you cry more, but I
does.
find onions better than the yellow. Yeah, that's funny.
I think maybe it's been in the refrigerator so long that it's
there
not.
You go. There's your secret.
Yeah, whew, although it's starting.
Where's that paper towel? Wipe your face.
Yeah, it's right here. What am I supposed to do with it?
If it's wet, well, don't do it now. It's got onion on it. You're supposed to just take a paper towel that's wet and wipe your eyes. And
oh, I see.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, I'll try it next time before I touch the onion. I just like having a nice wet paper towel to clean my hands with.
Well,
all right, there you go, Catherine.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, just one more question. Everyone's chatting me saying thank you, so I just wanted to tell you that.
Of course.
As well. Everyone's very excited to try their dishes, but I just wanted to, Dawn asked which Italian region you think that the dish best fits.
Oh. I feel like I'm on a quiz show. I'm afraid to say the wrong thing. I'm gonna say central to northern Italy. And the reason I'm gonna say that, and then I'm gonna go look it up after the class, is because I associate sort of spicier, more intense flavors with the south of Italy. And this is a mild, creamier pasta that I think doesn't, to me, sort of remind me as much of those like spicy seaside flavors. That said,
we're gonna take your word for that.
Yeah, no one Google that because I don't want to be wrong, but I will say that the kind of, this sauce is loosely inspired by like cacio e pepe, which is a Roman dish. So make of that what you will. But I think very much this is an American pasta dish. I think that an Italian would probably think that there are a bunch of things wrong with this. I just love finding ways to use produce that's in season, and I love making pasta. So those two things go together, and here we are. One more note I will just say, because my fiance, who I cook for most of the time, he's the one eating my food most of the time, he loves everything spicy and puts red pepper flakes on this. I didn't put that in the recipe because I don't tend to eat it with red pepper flakes, but if you are someone who loves a little bit of spice and everything, that would go really well with this and make it more Italian. Why not? But these onions are really, I'm moving them over here.
Thank you so much, Lidey. I think that.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I hope everybody enjoyed it. And now you have dinner.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you.
Thank you for
It
joining.
was a privilege to be here and to meet all of you sort of virtually through Zoom. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much.